Hey,
Hey,
oh, good morning, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you today?
Oh, best day ever. Oh, hey, nice shirt. Very
I
sharp.
know, man. Look at that. Wow, new shirts come in and man,
Oh,
kind of back to matchies again,
yeah.
So
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today?
we got a pretty good chat going on over here. So hopefully everybody will keep that going. Just to let the chat know, we're going to need a lot of assistance from you guys today. So be ready. Give us your hot sports opinion on what you see from Fabric and Power BI.
Yep.
Your
So,
hot takes.
yeah. Honestly, let's dive right into this. This is a kind of a hot button topic that has been floating around recently, and I think there's a lot of aspects of this that I think deserve exploring. So,
Yeah,
if you've been
definitely.
part of the debate on this, why don't you post in the chat what your thoughts are on? Hey, should we have Power BI without Fabric? What's your opinion on the subject?
Yeah. So a lot of this has come about, kind of surfing the social media channels and maybe I lurk on many of them way too much, right? I don't usually engage in them, but I've seen the topic pop up on Reddit. I've seen a stream that was brought up on Blue Sky. I think a lot of people here have probably seen things on LinkedIn. I don't know how much on Twitter I've seen a lot of the things. I don't think I've seen it as much there, right? But kind of setting the stage. The debate has kind of been right. Is Power BI being forgotten about? For lack of better terms, because of Microsoft, because of Fabric. Is everything else going over there? Is Fabric being pushed down our throats? Right. So that's kind of the premise of it. So again, from the chat, we'd love to hear what have you seen? What do you feel? Right? Is it valid? Is it not valid? Right? That's kind of what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, and I think if I hop over to my desktop, I could show one of the biggest things I think has been most on people's minds, and I think is a very legitimate. Oh my gosh, I hate that thing. I wish there's a remember this, just don't delete my stuff. I don't want you to delete my stuff. Um, I think a legitimate thing is if we look at our uh, options, and we look at the preview feature list over here. Um, like we've got a scroll bar here
Yeah.
of features that are sitting in preview, and
You haven't turned on Tendo View yet?
I
Oh my
just
god.
no, I have not had a chance to do that. Right?
Oh, well, I've turned it on. I haven't looked at it. Donald says he loves it. So,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. I do need to do that. I want to do that, and
future
I've got to
episode.
explore all this stuff. But there's just so much stuff going on. You got to pick your battles, right? But I think the big thing is like, okay, hey, where is it? Why isn't my shape map visual in
Yeah.
GA yet? Right? Like this poor shape map visual has been out here since I think it's 2016. Like we're approaching like the we're approaching the decade on the preview feature list for the shape map visual. I could be wrong. Maybe
Yeah.
it's less, but that's a big one, right? But
Yeah, and I think that one, right, gets you gotta leave that one in preview just because of all the jokes, right? So it's gotta stay there. But, you know, field parameters. There are definitely a lot of people using field parameters in production solutions.
mhm,
And, if this is saying it's still a preview feature, I mean, it's probably as solid as it's gonna get. Why not make it a GA feature,
right,
right? Because we look at this, we go, well, if it's in preview, some places have a policy that say I can't use anything that's in preview for production, which is not a bad policy. I've kind of changed softened that policy. Is if it's in preview, we need to discuss whether we should use it or not. But I think field parameters like that is just it's a no-brainer. Oh, yeah, you've seen it used well every place. So,
yeah,
yeah, this to me is a very valid discussion point, call it complaint. There's way too many preview features. We need to work on getting them down.
right. Like okay, how about all these visuals here? Like
Yeah, well, so and this has been an interesting rollout strategy, right? And I know I think you did what, like an hour, 2 hour long thing with Miguel and his vision
Hmm.
board and everything like that. And I love the vision. If you go through that vision board and then you go through the Power BI report attached to it and actually see the progress that they made, right? Now you could debate whether it's good or bad that they rolled out some of these new slicers all as preview features. I guess it kind of fits that pattern of them pushing a lot of preview features out. But yeah, I again I can kind of see where it stems to debate, but they've made progress on this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, where the discussions kind of lead to then is, well, have they made enough progress? Right?
Hmm.
If they weren't so focused on fabric, would they have made more, say, on the core visuals? And honestly, I don't know. I don't know how anybody else could know without saying, "Here's the budget you're gonna run, and you have to make money and, do other things," So
Well,
it's
yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I'll leave people for debate, and I'll point people to every month I publish, along with Helen Wall, we publish an update as to the features that are released inside of Fabric. And I don't know if you've seen this on LinkedIn, but it gets shared out every single
Mhm.
month.
Yeah, I
And
think you and Helen do a great job. I see this all the time on LinkedIn.
well, thank you.
Mhm.
We've been doing this since 2021, right? So we've kind of called out all of the features and functionality that's been rolling out since then. And we can easily go back to then and look at what are the big updates, what are the things that are going in, what gets put into the platform that's most useful. But even back then, we saw months where there were fewer updates. Why are there fewer updates in some months? Back way before Fabric was even a thing, and I think a lot of that comes down to Microsoft is very strategic when they roll out, um, when they roll out your, um, uh, when they roll out features, right? Like features surge forward, in right before and after conferences, right? And thank you, Alex, for super chatting. Keep your chocolate out of my peanut butter. So
Yeah,
thank you very
keep your Power BI out of my Fabric or your Fabric out of my Power BI, right? So that's a good
Yep,
analogy.
yep, yep,
And I
yep.
know Alex has been in the thick of this, right? Because I've seen him across a lot of the social medias doing a good job of having open and fair discussions on it. So I really do appreciate Alex, and I'm sure a lot of the community appreciates him for the way that he engages on the social media and doesn't have every answer, but definitely is open to it. So good job there.
Yeah, 100%. Oh my gosh, I'm still hold the old deployment pipeline question. So
No, we
this is
got a
my
lot of
first.
other
This is
good
our first
comments in
live
the
stream. We've not done this before,
yeah, we got
so
a lot of good
yeah,
statements, I would say, not even questions in the chat,
yep.
so
And I do want to say the thumbnail is 100% clickbait. I'm terribly sorry, everyone. Like this, we're trying to emphasize and like show that we hear the rage that some people have about this, and do want to be empathetic to people as they're going through this and they're working through these challenges. And so, we're all working together. Like that's the benefit of the Power BI and Fabric community, right? We're all
mhm.
working on these problems and challenges together, and we help each other out through these things. So let's not lose sight of that as um, we think that our little brother now is getting more attention than we are, right? Fabric is new. It's a huge investment on the Microsoft side, right? Like everybody's talking about it. And that's all well and good, right? Like that. I mean, how would you expect? How would you expect that to happen, right? Like that's part of it. So,
Yeah, well,
um,
that's a good analogy too, right? I mean, a new baby comes into the family, and just for a while, it needs more attention. And yes, the siblings feel that a little bit is moved off of them, and it's a valid feeling, right, or a valid statement. But you were sharing, the pace here, right? When we kind of look back from the number of years and the things that are on your slides that you're putting together, when we looked at it this morning, some months are slow, some months aren't, right? But is it, it felt like it was still a pretty good pace. Now, I think the next part of the discussion comes in is, are the things that they're doing on the Power BI side more pro dev, which forces you up to either a PPU or to a fabric capacity, then really what has been, for just the pro licensed people, what have you done for me lately?
Sure. Well, yeah, and I guess that uh, so that's where I go for pro licensed people. I say, hey, look at all the updates that continue to come out on the Power BI side. The marketing side, maybe it's not being marketed as heavily. Like you've kind of got your run, you've got your room put together. You're not the baby who just entered the field that people don't like. I talk to people every week who don't know anything about fabric, right? So there's
Mhm.
there's definitely reasons to have more emphasis on the marketing side there. So that 100% makes perfect sense to me. Um, uh, but that doesn't mean the love isn't being shared to the pro people. Now, where I think we've made a good Kevin and I've got a very popular video that has had thousands of views calling for fabric premium per user, right? And honestly, I think it should be the exact same price as premium per user. The reason being, and let's go back over, I want to talk about where these components fit in and why I think it's fine for how things are, but also why we want them brought together. Okay, so
Okay.
um, if we look at what a Power BI deployment is, we basically has uh, these are the components, right? And there's the gateway. You've got your ETL, which is Power Query. You've got your storage, which is data marts, which you can skip, right? This is optional. You've got your semantic modeling, and you've got your report.
Mhm.
All of these components are part of your Power BI deployment. Now, you can continue to run and operate with just these components. You don't need to have
All with a pro license.
all with the pro license. Well, not the storage. The
Not the
storage,
store. The storage as a data mart is the one that's on here that has to have the current PPU license.
right, right,
Okay.
right. Yep.
But your data flow Gen 1, that's your ETL. All right.
Hmm.
And a couple people in the chat recently were just praising it, right? It's still there.
Yep.
It's still use it. There's nothing stopping you from doing it, or you do all your ETL within your Power BI report directly to the semantic model, right? So
Hmm. Yeah, and I think if we if we look at and focus on these, if we focus in on these, all of these have reasons why we want to be on a platform that allows us to have a maturity path in front of us. And if we start with Power Query, Power Query is a wonderful tool that lots of business users get tons of value out of, right? I think we can all agree on that, right? Like Alex, Power Query everything, right?
mhm,
Um, until you can't, right? Like we've all worked with Power Queries that get to the point where they're like, I was troubleshooting one with a client yesterday. We were talking about it. They've got a Power Query or a data flow that runs for 8 hours
mhm.
or 5 hours. Sorry, 5 hours. Over exaggerating, but five
It's
hours is a long, long
yeah.
time, right? They're running on a premium capacity, and they're uh, yep, Power Query everything. They're running it on premium capacity, and so they're able to do that. But holy cow, that's a big deal. Yep. And Donald's right. Stick with Power Query until it doesn't work. But in just the Power BI ecosystem, what do you do when it doesn't work? You could try refactoring, you could try all sorts of things that we've done for the last 5 years to address
Mhm.
challenges when Data Factory doesn't work or data flows don't work. but there's an upper bound to what you can do.
Yeah.
That's when being in Fabric and you could just suddenly decide to use one of those new capabilities to help address those issues becomes something that's very useful for you.
Yeah, and what some people end up doing is they drop back to what they know, right? They
Hmm.
go, instead of doing everything over in Power Query, they drop back to like, oh well, let me just get an export from this team and I'll bring it in Excel and I'll manually change it myself. It's okay. It's faster for me than to wait for a run for 5 hours once a week or whatever. And so, that's that. That I want to start off saying, well, I guess that's fine. But it really isn't, right? I mean, you're adding a lot of manual work to yourself to do it, to where if you had these other options to move up, right? And maybe that's a good place to look at moving up within Fabric. But
Yeah.
then they start running into the whole thing, right? Where Fabric is more for the traditional IT people than really Power BI is, and in a way that's true.
Well, hang on a second there. Let me, I'm going to push back on that too.
Okay.
And uh, I'll say if you're mid 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s and working in business, Power Query is probably the tool you've worked with for a very long time and you know and you love because I mean that dates back to the early teens, right? I mean, I forget when Power Query was introduced into Excel. Was it 2011? I want to say
Well, I
or
don't
12,
know.
somewhere in there, right?
Somewhere in there, prior to actually Power BI being in existence, right? So,
Right,
because a
right,
lot
right.
of this stuff started with Excel, either add-ons or things they started building into it, and then bundling all into one tool.
Yeah. And so people are used to doing that. These business users, many of them are also very comfortable working with Visual Basic, right? I mean, Visual
Mhm.
Basic is, oh, it's visual, it's easy. No, it's not as visual and easy. I mean, once you get into it, you learn it, hey, you're good to go. But when you just hand Visual Basic to somebody, it's that starts to get into like what I would consider, what lots of people consider that pro dev side of the house. You're talking about objects and you're talking about scripting and coding and getting those components in place. So that too is a pro dev item that's out there. That's just in Excel that people business
Mhm.
users use. I'd also contend, and because I know this for a fact, that there are a lot of business students graduating from business school for the last decade uh, that have a good deal of experience working with Python notebooks.
Yeah.
And as they come into the business world, they're saying, hey, I want to use these Python notebooks. Well, having them together, having your peanut butter and chocolate together means, those of you who are like classical Power Query people, great. God bless. Go forward, Power Query it, right? But for the new generation that's coming on, they've got a path to use those tools alongside yours and give you a roadmap to upskill, give you a roadmap to do new things and new capabilities. It's not saying abandon the old and only do the new. It's saying let's do both of these things together. And that's why I love Alex's comment before about like keep your uh, chocolate on my peanut butter. I think this is exactly it, right? Chocolate and peanut butter together are awesome. I mean, at least in my opinion, I'm a big fan of them, right? And that's where the big advantages that we get by having these things together. And it's not saying you shouldn't do or you have to go do the fabric stuff. It's saying if and when you if and when you get to the point where you need it, it's there for you on the engine side.
But
Um,
does it seem that a lot of the people coming from the business, right?
mhm.
And they're strictly doing the Power BI stuff that we've talked about. They then have a hard time selling to their internal people to say, let's buy a fabric capacity, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, couldn't one of the paths be that, so you have this unwieldy data that lives in Excel, right? And you want to show that, hey, I could do things better if I had Python available to me. Well, guess what? Python's now in Excel, right?
Hmm.
So if you just kind of show, hey, here's how we could change it in this Excel workbook quickly with Python, which then brings down the amount of time it took to ingest into Power BI. Now that starts building your use case, and you haven't had to turn anything onto it. But you got to sell your internal people, right? And sometimes it's those budget questions, right? Of tell me that it's show me that it's going to give me a return on my investment, and you're going, well, how do I show that, right? So, but there's a path there too, right? And show how much time it's saving you, and this, that, and the other. So, I mean, there are definitely paths, and like you said, I agree. They're the kids these days, right? Because I'm old enough to say that, that are coming out with much more skills, but definitely in Python. Almost everybody that I talk to is coming out with some Python code out of school these days. So,
Yep.
um,
Well,
definitely.
and let's get back to your cost uh, comment, as well as this comment from James Lee. He said he was at SQLBits 2024 last spring, and just around when
Mhm.
Fabric launched. He asked the Microsoft execs when they did their session, and they were very clear there will not be a Fabric per user. Um, okay, maybe. Maybe that's what they think today, and maybe that's what it will be forever.
The
That
nice
doesn't
thing
mean
is
we
people
can't
change their
advocate.
minds.
What's that? Yeah,
People change minds. I mean,
that's exactly right. That doesn't mean we can't continue to advocate for these capabilities and things that we want, right? I don't want anyone on this live stream to be forced to agree with me on everything. In fact, I would really expect you to not agree with everything that I say or do, or Kevin, and
mhm.
I'm not agree with you, right? Like, all those things are perfectly fine in a healthy society. We can choose to disagree with that, and we could choose to say, hey, this is something that we need, and keep asking them for it. And straight up, the executives at Microsoft on the Fabric and Power BI teams are the most receptive people, executives I've ever encountered across any company I've ever engaged with, when it comes to taking feedback and then doing the right thing from that.
Yeah.
Um,
And and you're exactly right. So when you go out to ideas.fabric.com and you put out there that you need a fabric per user, right? They'll just keep saying we need a fabric per user, right? They want to know why. They want to know the use cases that are in there. What and this has been a discussion that I've seen pretty much open as well, right? I have a little bit different viewpoint. I do think that that an F2 that you pause is fabric per user, right?
yeah.
But um, you know,
What I would say there, I would love to see, and this is something we can put in ideas.com, and automatically pausing and unpausing fabric capacity, right?
and
Just make it
maybe
like what
yeah.
Synapse did, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, yes, like Synapse or even SQL does that, right? It says after an hour of inactivity, it pauses automatically,
Hmm.
right? I mean, maybe that's a path to it, right? But if you're manually starting and stopping it, you're totally in control of what the cost is, because I think that's the other debate, right? Do you say, well, I'll only get it if it's well, we can't say $20 a month because the license is going up to right that the pro license itself, right?
Right.
So whatever number you want to throw at it, say it's 30 or $40 a month, right? So if that's what you want your spend to be, just stop and start your capacity. Now, here's the next problem that brings up, right? Is in order to do these things, you need access into Azure,
Hmm.
right? You need to be able to set up as a tenant and everything. And I think people have a hard time working with from the business side. You have a hard time working with your IT side to get that type of access.
Right.
And honestly, that becomes such a challenge at some companies that you just give up, right? And you just go back to another way of doing it. So it's not an answer for everybody, but we can't solve all the people process things at different companies with technology. So
Well, and here's a big point around this. I've made this many times on this live stream. I'm going to keep iterating it because while I love the 77 of you who are watching this across our various channels, there's millions of people in the world out there who haven't heard this, and we got to get this mantra out.
Yeah.
People are going to do what they need to do with data to get their job done and to be successful as individuals, right?
Yeah.
They can either do that in Access and Excel with copy and paste manual processes that are rife for all sorts of potential issues and um, challenges in keeping that up and running, or we can enable them to do those same capabilities in an environment that's controlled and managed, and give them tools to start to do things in a better way. You can't necessarily stop all of the manual stuff. You can't enforce all automation because you know people are going to get their jobs done, right? They've got kids to feed, they got a mortgage to pay, right?
Hmm.
They can't lose their job because IT said, oh, we're not going to give you an ODBC connection to this so you can run a query. uh, but you have access to this SSRS report from 2009. So download that and then work with it. They're going to use that, right? They're just going to continue to use that thing or that extract from the system, and they're going to continue to operate, right? Um,
Yeah. So Andy put a question in while we were talking about pausing.
mhm.
Is it possible to pause Fabric using the REST API? Yes. And we showed that an episode on that long time ago. There's articles out there of people using Power Automate. There's people using we use Azure Runbooks to put it on a schedule. I think in the Power Automate, somebody set it up as just send an email to an account and it starts or stops it. So there are definitely ways to do that. What you lose.
I have a board here of all my ideas for videos, and like this has come up like 15 times.
Yeah,
I've wanted to
maybe you
create
should
a
do
video
another
that's
one.
just
Yeah.
that, and I want to put it up there, but I don't have all my dry erase markers are gone.
Oh
Uh,
well, another time.
I'm a
I'll ping you
rat
later to
behind the
remind
scenes
you.
here. Yes, yes, yes. We'll get that out there.
So
Right?
yeah, I mean it's definitely possible. Um, Anthony has a statement in here, which to me it kind of makes sense, right? But uh, I wasn't aware of this. If you're using real time analytics, then Microsoft says you need a minimum of an F4,
Mm.
and which is brings up the cost somewhat. And you can't stop or start your capacity if you're using real time analytics. Well, the last part kind of makes sense to me because if you're saying you want real time intelligence, right, then you want real time. So it would have to stay up, right? I
Yeah.
mean, otherwise it's no longer real time. So that second part kind of makes sense to me, but maybe you're trying to use some of that technology, but in a little bit different way. That okay, maybe there's other solutions, but yeah, that was new to me. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't realize that you have to
So
be at an
that's
F4.
one where, and I think that's just a recommendation because I tried doing RTI on an F2
Hmm.
and it worked, but I like blew through my F2 pretty quick.
Pretty quickly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So just be a careful on that one.
Yeah, and
And
maybe
yeah,
that's why they're recommending that minimum. But
we got $1 for the jar for the Semantic Link Labs. Put that over there. So
how many different jars should we get going, right?
right. Um, yeah, that's a good call. And Jason also called out you can pause and unpause it with Semantic Link Labs. Yes, but you have to have a capacity running in order to do that. So
That's what I keep thinking. Yeah, I'm like, because I don't understand how that works. Because if it's paused, how do you start the notebook to unpause it?
well, and I think that's another component that I think we also have to get accustomed to, right? Especially if you're coming from like the Power BI world and that side of the house is
Hmm.
like in Power BI, a lot of us, and I mean a lot of companies had a singular capacity that we ran and did everything with. In the Fabric world, you're going to have potentially lots of capacities and smaller capacities to do a variety of different tasks, to service a variety of different teams. That becomes I mean, when you talk about a $5,000 buy-in on the Power BI side, and I can't even do it right. 5,000. I mean, relatively, where's the $200 mark right there,
Yeah.
right? Like all of a sudden, having a $200 or $300 a month. Well, actually, no, $200 because you're gonna run it all the time. Capacity that's like maybe your orchestration capacity that you just run all of your stuff out of your start, your stops, all that stuff. Maybe that makes a great deal of sense, right? So you've got a $200 capacity that's running all the time, and you've got an F-16 that you're stopping and starting to address all of your compute. Or maybe it's an F-64 or F-250, I don't know, whatever it is, right? You've got a larger capacity that you're unpausing, using for a period of time, shutting it down, and then just continuing on with your activities,
Okay.
right?
So now, right, we've kind of tailed into talking a lot about Fabric, but try to
Yes.
er,
Good call.
moving back to just saying just Power BI. Now, here's one question that I forgot to preface with you in when we first met, but Power BI itself has always been kind of bundled in with something else, right? It was kind of like, hey, Power BI is almost an Office product, but
Hmm.
specifically, it was part of the Power Platform, right? So Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps, right? Why are we having this conversation with Fabric and we didn't have it when Power BI, was really more part of the Power Platform? Nobody sat there and said, "Oh, well, it's bundled in with Power Apps, so I have to use Power Apps," right? Or I have to
Hmm.
use Power Automate. Yes, people talked about you can use it and you can get this much more benefit out of it. Isn't it really the same thing? Is you can use the Fabric items, you can get this additional benefit from it. But again, there's nothing forcing you to do it, just like you weren't forced to use those other components when it was more bundled in there. Do,
Yeah.
any thoughts?
Well, you're spot on, and I'll take that further back to Excel. You don't have to use Visual Basic. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
have to use Power Query or Power Pivot. You didn't have to do those things. You could just use the pieces of the solution that were right for you and right for your company. And straight up, only ever do that. Don't try to use all the things.
Yeah,
That's a bad path forward. If you don't have value in doing something, don't do that thing.
yeah. And maybe it's just more of, marketing's trying to push Fabric a whole lot more, which they are, right? And so we're seeing it a whole lot more. I think in um one of the threads that I read on one thing, which I thought was kind of a good thing, they pointed out that when you look at the Power BI blog, the first thing that they're talking about at the top of that blog is Fabric, right? Rather than just Power BI, right? So they kind of talked about some new things on Fabric, and so maybe, maybe some of that marketing could change. But again, that's a marketing strategy. You market what you want to be sold off of the product that is already selling, right? You already have some inroads with people there. Of course, you're gonna, push more marketing there. Um, so I just I don't know. I think I ignore so much marketing that it goes right over my head. I would have never seen unless somebody else pointed that out to me. So
Yeah,
um,
and I'll also, and Anthony's right here. He's saying poor Power BI doesn't know which family it belongs to.
yeah,
It's orphan being shared around,
good statement.
and to that extent, that's what business intelligence is. It is that middleware is a thing, but that's not.
Yeah,
It
it's a
is that.
middle. Yeah.
It is what stands in the gap between pure IT and pure business, and it's what
Mhm.
makes that connection, right? So having those connections on both sides is critically important to Power BI. And I think actually piggyback on Mark's comment here.
Yeah,
And he's saying, because I think he's referring to your
to the
uh,
Power
Power
Platform.
Platform,
Yeah.
because it doesn't share the same SaaS environment. I think honestly, I think a lot of the reason why Fabric is so successful is because of how successful Power BI Power BI is. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Thanks a lot, Alex. Um,
Have you never heard that one before?
no, I've not heard that one.
Okay. I think it's been used before, so it is a
All
great
right,
one.
all right. Well, now I'm all red and. But
Right.
the Power BI, it was designed to run. I mean, and this is business intelligence. Business intelligence is the worst of the workloads of any application out there. Lots of data, lots of compute, spiky usage. That's what business intelligence is, right? You have
and
to be able
and
to access.
always an add-on, always a last thought.
Right.
If you've done app development before, you
Yep.
sit there and you're going through a lot of the nitty-gritty type of stuff, and you bring up about reporting, and they go, "We'll look at that towards the end of the project." And
Right.
then they're always scrambling to put that in because the first thing you do is you show your beta release to somebody and they go, "Great, how do I report on that?" "Oh, we're still working on that part of it." I've seen a ton of projects go that way, and so now these type of tools help fill that gap because they can just take in the data while you're working on it. So,
Well, but I want to go. I want to hit on how Power BI is able to handle that spiky relationship, that spiky
mhm,
performance, that massive amount of data, that flexible compute to be able to like distribute it to all these different processes, all these different things, is what makes that back end engine, or however the heck they manage that Unix, whatever. I presume it's Unix. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's Unix. Back end that manages all these people doing all these different things, made that the ideal ecosystem to run all data workloads in the cloud. Is my personal opinion. I don't know anything about this, right? I'm sitting on the outside, just like all of you, looking in at what's going on there, and I say, wow. If Power BI is able to respond and do all of these things for all of these people with, I mean, honestly, an amazing amount of compute is managed by very little. That's an ideal place for all these other workloads to work and operate. And so it makes a ton of sense for me that the ecosystem that we would want all of our data workloads to be on is that back end system, right? Again, that doesn't mean, just because your computer has like hundreds of programs installed, it doesn't mean you have to run anything other than your browser for anything, right? Maybe that's all you do, right? Like my mom has a tablet and she's got hundreds of things installed on it. She literally just uses the tablet for surfing Facebook and responding to people on her browser, right?
mhm.
She doesn't even realize she has the Facebook app installed. I thought it would automatically open that on her tablet, but it doesn't. I don't know what she did, but she's tricked it to only open Facebook through the browser.
Browser.
Same thing in Fabric. If you just want the Power BI components, just use the Power
Mhm.
BI components,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and she's happy with it. She doesn't have to go any further. She was
Right.
able to customize her environment however she did it,
I,
right?
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so and there's another good from Andrew's comment, right? Is sometimes this debate sounds a lot like, it's the projection of IT and business tensions, which is exactly true, right? And I think you see it from both sides of the business people, right? There are conversations I have with business people that go, well, I don't need all of this stuff, and it shouldn't all be bundled in with that, right? As part of what you see. But also you see that there's business users that go, no, I want to get further, and my team won't let me, right? My IT won't let me. I know I keep kind of bringing up that theme, right? So it it's not a one size fit all. And from the IT side, if you really don't want the people using that, or if you are putting fabric capacities out there, you have what Chris has open here. You could decide how you want to configure your environment to allow it or not allow it, and then run those conversations. In fact, this is the one that I use in the tenant that I just, finished setting up. Is I set up security groups for it, and also for even starting the trial, right? So even within the company that I'm working with now, is we said, okay, we don't want everybody starting trials. We set up a group for that, put that into the right place. This is enabled, and those security groups are in here so that we're controlling it, right? And then we can have those conversations. Now, will that expand as time goes on and we understand, here's the solution that you want us to deliver? What size fabric capacity do we need to put that on? And if we have extra capacity, now we'll start bringing others in, or will we need to buy other capacities? It leads to that conversation. And the rest of the users are just learning Power BI, so they're really just handling the true Power BI stuff on it. So you can handle it, then you definitely don't need to be forced onto it. Now, the next part of what I've read through some of these debates is they go, well, if I want all those advanced pro features, right? So I have a pro license, but now I want more than that, right? Where I used to be able to get a premium capacity. Now I have to get a fabric capacity.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Do people hate when I do this, but fine, call it a dog capacity, right? I mean, what does it matter what the name is? Again, just because you're saying that it's marketed as a fabric capacity, we just showed you could turn off that people can't create fabric items, right? Or you could limit what it is that they're going to do. But you could still go up to that F64 and have unlimited view for everybody, which was in a lot of cases why people went to it. Not because of it, maybe more on being able to do the data flows and get more data in, have them run for more hours and stuff like that. That's still there. That's still at the same point than where it was. Now, did the price go up? Yeah. But when's the last time there was a price increase on any of these things?
Right.
So,
Well, I do want to like. There's a question that came in from a LinkedIn user. I'm sorry,
yeah, the
Restream
name
does
didn't.
not integrate super well with LinkedIn. So if you want to join the conversation, and more than just the anonymous user, please head over to YouTube and we can bring you in there. But this is a great question. What about governance? He gets asked this all the time from compliance. Um, Honestly, I think Fabric combined with Purview, um, combined with the monitoring tools that are out there and the admin APIs gives you a much tighter governance program of the
Mhm,
activities that go on in your organization. Let me explain why. So, again, we kind of talked about this earlier. People are going to get their job done with data, regardless of what tools you give them. They're going to
yep,
do it either going to do it manually, where
mhm,
you have no sight, no governance, no idea what they're doing. All you can see is yes, they have access to a report. Maybe you can see they have access to a report. It could be that Kevin has access to a report. Or wait, Kevin, wait, why can't I do this? Kevin has access to a report. Uh, Kevin Kevin downloads the report, saves it to a SharePoint folder because Kevin does that all the time. Unbeknownst to Kevin, I got access to the SharePoint folder. Um, and while Kevin's been doing that for 5 years, I got access to it like 18 months ago, and I found this data, and now I start to build something off of that thing.
mhm,
Well, you're gonna have no idea that's going on. If I'm opening it up, I'm copying, pasting, like you're gonna be that's gonna be your line of sight into that is gone, right? Uh, but if Kevin is working in Fabric, we could see all these connection strings. We could actually start to see that, and we can enable it. And
mhm,
honestly, that's where we come. That's where things like the endorsement capabilities really start to come into play. And if we look over in Fabric, or I'm sorry, in the one like data catalog, um, that's where we could actually see, like, hey, look, I've got master data, I've got promoted stuff, or I've got all these things that have no connections, right? Um, you know, this is, this makes it a lot easier. Again, if you enable these capabilities with Power BI to bring people into the fold, right? It's not saying you have to use Power or Fabric, but using Power BI, using these tools, enabling people really helps your overall governance.
Yeah. And I think, kind of going back to some of the things that we were talking about, Anthony, he's had a lot of good comments today.
Yeah.
I suspect many orgs, are annoyed that they're being forced to move to Fabric from premium and then pay more for features that they don't want. So, okay, so premium capacities, right? They made a decision to say let's get rid of premium capacities, and the F-64 is the equivalent. Oh, and by the way, that was kind of a price increase without announcing a price increase, right? And then they announced
Hang
it.
on, how much of a price increase was it?
Well, so the list price goes up to $8,000, and then if you do reserved instance, it brings it back down. I want to say, in my memory, it's close to the $6,000 limit. And
Okay.
most people would talk about the premium at a $5,000 entry point. So you're talking $1,000 a month, so 12,000 a year.
I thought it was a few $100 difference.
Okay, I could be wrong. I haven't studied all the
I
costs.
because I because when I saw the people were complaining about that, they were comparing it to the full list price of the non-reserve capacity. That's
Mhm,
8,600. Well, hang on, reserve it. It gets. I thought it was 5165 versus 590 or 499.
mm.
So I thought it was $166 increase. Not
Reserving it definitely brings you a whole lot closer. Yeah, I don't.
yeah,
I mean, I just looked at some numbers that, and those are the ones that I haven't looked recently, but those are numbers that I thought I've heard in discussions.
yeah.
But regardless, it goes up some some amount, right? Whatever that percentage is. So again, if we haven't had a price increase in any of those capacities for quite a while, right? Then are you really having to pay for features that you're not using? Right? Because you're still paying for the features that you wanted to use. So that I could see it being, anytime there's a price increase on any software, it drives everybody crazy. You got to redo budgets. You got to do. Microsoft is not immune to that. Any vendor I've ever worked with it's always been that way. If you have a coupon from the
Yes,
newspaper.
and Jason's right. It is cheaper if you have a coupon from the newspaper. And Andrew is also right. Like, hey, we're going from buying a capacity where we can negotiate what the price is, and we went from a lot of companies were able to get that discount, right? Like he said, he was paying basically $3,900 a month, not 5,000. So he's saying that's a $1,200 discount. That's a licensing Office M365. You negotiate those base prices up and down or whatnot. This is going towards your Azure spend. Now that
Mhm.
discounting and that negotiations are a very different thing. And this now goes to that overall commitment that you have on Azure. And it's been a little while since I've done an Azure negotiation, so I don't want to comment directly on that. But there's all sorts of benefits you get by committing to larger amounts of Azure
Mhm.
capacity if you're in a larger organization, right? And that's where you're going to start to see that offset. Unfortunately, it does come off the top line and not on the individual item lines that you would normally see on the M365. So that's a change, but um,
Yeah. But I would also say that if if you are already using a premium P1 capacity, right? You are probably in a company that's advanced enough that you will get some benefit out of doing some workloads in Fabric. But again, it doesn't mean you're forced to do that. but you're probably, at least some people in your company are going to be advanced enough that they could have things go more efficiently that if you use that. So, yeah, if I'm going to have to pay more, am I going to explore when is the big thing, and how to actually use some more of that. Now, if you're already paying for a P1 and you're peaking that thing at 90% for 12 hours a day, right? You're probably not going to throw a new workload onto that, right? And you
Well,
you
but
you
but
feel
hang
like you
on,
have
that
to
goes
pay
back to
more.
our conversation before. Maybe you're peaking out a P1 or you're coming close to peaking out because you're using data flows Gen 2. We're
Or Gen
seeing
1,
this in the
Gen 1.
metric or Gen 1 or Gen 2. We're seeing this in the metrics app that while these processes are very low code and friendly to use, they're not as we're now able to like see and compare the amount of compute it takes to run something through a data flow versus something to run it through on a notebook. And there's a significant uh increase in processing to run Power Query versus a Python notebook. So that by having them combined, even if you're not using it today, that gives you a roadmap in the future to say, hey, maybe I don't need to spend another $5,000 a month on upgrading my P1 to a P2, or F64 to an F128. I can
Mhm.
just simply start to rewrite some of my worst offenders
Right.
from Power Query into Python and just run and operate those in the same place, right?
Yep. Yeah, yeah, definitely, right? Or it may even be that you take part of, what you're doing in Dataflow Gen 1, maybe it will run more efficiently in Dataflow Gen 2, right? And so
Mhm.
you do a lot of the earlier processing in that Dataflow Gen 2 and still connect whatever output and change your Dataflow Gen 1 that feeds the final part into your semantic model, right? There's no reason you can't do some of these things. And again, Andrew's kind of comment is it's kind of agreeing with us, right? Is anybody that was already invested in the peak capacities were best positioned to immediately benefit from Fabric.
Yeah.
Whether your path that you just brought up, I think it should be the most common, right? What can I do to have to not move up from P1 or from F64 to F32? Right? I could do these type of things. It gives me more options for it.
But again, don't
So
do it if you don't need to do it.
yeah.
If you're happy with Power BI Pro, God bless, go forth in Power BI Pro. I've not
Hmm.
heard anyone even hint at the elimination of the Power BI Pro license or the Power BI Pro processes.
Right.
It's like it's not a thing. So I think that you've got a strong path forward on all of those things, and you could stay in there yourself, right? Um, but yeah, so good
Okay. Well,
conversation.
let's
Yeah.
we got one minute. Let's Anthony's nice comment here again, right? Is
Mhm.
he's working with a nonprofit and they've been developing over on Databricks and Azure over the last 6 years. And they wouldn't spend lots of money for us to move to Fabric, and that money is the developers, right? The people that to code that. Great, don't 100%. If I was invested this far into Databricks or other things on Azure, right? I don't think anything is forcing you to go to Fabric. Now, would you also look at small parts of that to say, could shortcuts help you if you're already bringing it into, and maybe it's only shortcuts because you're already running premium, you're already doing stuff with Databricks, but 100%, I never propose changing an architecture just to change the architecture. Don't chase the shiny. If
Yep.
that's working for you, continue to use it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I've got a video out there on the ultimate data solution, or whatever it was called, where it says, "Yeah, stay in Databricks, mirror into Fabric,
Mhm.
If you want, right? Like if you want to
Mirror
run workloads
shortcut,
in
yeah.
Fabric and you want to enable that front end, um, but we're seeing, I mean, this is working out for us personally. We've got our enterprise data engineers that have got like 5+ years of engineering going into the Databricks environment. They're going to stay there, but they're mirroring the data into OneLake, into Fabric, so
Mhm.
that all of the domain spaces who need to do things with that data can then do that with a self-service Fabric capacity. And we
Yep.
don't have to worry about butting heads. We don't have to worry about giving them access to things in Databricks that is just secured and managed for the enterprise. It allows us for that segmentation there, right? Again, you don't have to go the Fabric route if you just want to do Power BI. Stay in Power BI, do that.
Yeah.
Let data engineering do the Databricks stuff. Let that stuff happen over there. Use the components that are useful for you, right?
Just stay with what you got and ignore the fear of missing out feeling.
Right, right. Don't watch the videos on Fabric. Watch the videos on Power BI.
Yeah.
The people who are there were lots of people doing videos on Power BI. I was one of them, and there were just lots of competition. There's
Uh,
lots of great work that's going on over there.
and I think there still are a lot of people doing it on Power BI, but you're right. They've tailed into doing a lot with Fabric as well, the user groups, all that type of stuff, which if we get into that, we'll go way over. So
Yeah, yep. Um, yes, and maybe we'll have to. We did didn't we do a live stream on data marts and data warehouses? I thought we did, or I have a video out on it. Uh,
I'm
I
not.
have real concerns. I love because this came up. What about migrating data marts to data warehouses?
Mhm.
Go check out the video. I love the concept of a data marts. I loved when data marts got implemented in Power BI. I think there's a better solution out there now. Do check out that video. All right.
Yeah, it's either you have a video or we did it here on a Fabric Friday. I
We
remember.
maybe we did both.
Yeah,
I think
maybe both. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we are near the end of the hour. Uh, uh, Kevin, why don't you take us out?
Sure. So I hope this was great. Thanks for everybody in the chat that has put a lot of topics out there. I really think it's good to kind of keep an open discussion. It's good to see how well it's come out on some of the social media platforms. I don't it some always get a little bit ugly, some don't, but for most of it, it's been a great open discussion. I know Microsoft, people like Alex is bringing it back into the leadership. I know they're very interested in hearing about this and they're thinking about it. So keep talking about it, keep trying to find ways to do it, and just keep being excellent. So
Yes,
keep having the best day ever. That's where I should have closed.
that's right. Thank you guys also very much. You have the best day ever. Peace.
Peace.
Combine strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.